Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Nicole Chabot. I am the president of the Springfield Chamber of Commerce, and it is my honor to welcome you here this evening on behalf of the Chamber and our community partners to tonight's pre-election candidates forums for Wards 1 and Wards 2. The Springfield Chamber of Commerce is made up of people who live, work, and play in Springfield. Ours is not an exclusive view of business, but of a whole community. Our membership cares deeply about building a healthy and well-rounded community and giving back. The Chamber took the initiative with the forums because we felt that it was important that the voting electorate have an opportunity to gauge and view the candidates and evaluate their responses to a uniform set of questions. And we wanted to provide this opportunity to engage the public and have people become more involved in the elections. Tonight we have joining us candidates from Ward 1 and Ward 2, and I'll ask you just to, I'm going to identify you now if you want to raise your hand. From Ward 1 we have Suzanne Wilkes, we've got Glenn Fuel, absent tonight is Lauren Jacks, we've got in Ward 2 Howard Burdine, Jason Franklin, and David Duval. We'd like to thank you all for joining us here this evening and congratulate you all on stepping up to join the race and put yourselves forward to participate in the democratic process. We'd also like to thank our community partners for their role in bringing the forums to the community alongside the Chamber. And those are Age Friendly, the Cooks Creek Expansion Committee, Springfield Agricultural Group, the Springfield Democratic Development, Springfield Women's Institute, and Vision 2020. It's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight's forum, Mr. Linton Sullen. He is a respected leadership trainer and a very well-known and longtime resident of Springfield. He's been moderating all of our forums up to this point and doing a fantastic job of it, and we greatly appreciate all of that. And so I will hand it over without further ado to Mr. Sullen.
We'll give that to them. Good evening and welcome. I know from looking around the audience, many of you have been at other forums, so you've heard my spiel at the beginning, but for those who haven't been here, you have to hear it because we're laying out the rules of engagement. The purpose of the evening is to allow you, the voting public, to hear the candidates speak to the various issues which we will put to them. The purpose of the evening, as I've said many times, is not to hear what you think on the issues, because unfortunately you're not on the ballot, and therefore your opinion on the issues tonight happens to be irrelevant. And therefore, I'm sorry, we won't be hearing your opinions on that. Because if you want your views heard, you're going to have to put your name on the ballot, and then we will hear your views next time at the forum. Because it's the candidates who have taken the time to put their name forward and put themselves into that position. And what's the payback they get for that? They get to share their views tonight. So what do I actually mean by that? Well, we've actually had 3 very cooperative audiences so far, and 3 last time. So we're on to number 7. The rules are you may not respond in any way to any comment which any candidate makes. You may not clap, cheer, groan, sigh, forehead slap, palms up, look at the ceiling, eyeball roll, because that's sharing your opinion on what they said, and I'm sorry you're not in the forum, and therefore, with all due respect, we don't care what you think. What we do care is what these people think, and you get to express your opinion when you go into the ballot box, and you get to do that secretly, and we're going to ask you to do it secretly tonight too. You can think all the thoughts you want, you just can't say anything. And I always tell the story because the first time we did this last election out in Cooks Creek, as soon as we told this, there was a guy in the back, standing at the back, who said, "I can't talk, then I might as well go home." And I said, "Yes, sir, you might as well, because we're going to ask you to leave if you do that." And the candidates have agreed not to do that to each other. They won't be interrupting each other. They will give the other candidate their opportunity to speak when they have the mic, and then when their turn comes, they'll get their opportunity to speak. How are we going to do the sequence? Well, I got myself my handy dandy app, and there's an app for everything, and I have an app that makes a random list. I've knocked it down to 5 names for now, and so what's going to happen is every time I ask a question, I'm going to hit the shuffle button, and it will create a random order so that nobody gets the advantage of being first or last or being behind everybody any time. So if you're wondering why it looks so random when they're speaking, it's because it's so random when they're speaking. That's why it looks that way. So they all know that's what's happening. We're going to give them 2.5 minutes. If you see me stand up, that's my message to them that they've got between 10 and 15 seconds left to wrap it up before we move on to the next speaker. And they're just going to hand the mic between them. We're going to give them 10 questions that they've had a chance to prepare. Because we've got another candidate tonight, we're not probably going to have time to get to all 12. And then we will take questions from the floor. But the questions from the floor, you don't get to ask, I get to ask. So what you do is you give me the question, I look at it, and I take all the argumentative and factual statement stuff out because, remember, we're not interested in your opinion, with all due respect. We're going to ask them a question from your question. We're not going to make your one-page argument of, did you know that, and it really bothers me that. That's not going to be in your question, sorry. So don't bother writing it down because I won't read it. All I'm going to say is, what is your policy or view on this issue? That's what I'm going to ask these people and let them speak to it. So that's what we're going to do. So with no further ado, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask the candidates to introduce themselves and answer the question, what motivated you to run for council, what qualifies you for the role, and what is your vision for the RM? And the sequence is going to be Glenn, David, Howard, Suzanne, and Jason. But you don't have to remember, I'll remind you. Glenn, you're up first. What motivated you, what qualifies you, what's your vision, who are you?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I live in the community of Springfield, Ward 1, and value how our community operates as a whole. I have been part of this community for 41 years, owning property and living here permanently since 1997. I have owned my own business, Video King, for over 30 years, and have been servicing rural communities for all of this time, including Enola, Oakbank, and Dougal, and other areas in the municipality. Over the years, I have seen many changes in the industry. I have had to forward plan and adapt in my own business because of format changes. Beta, VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, and now 4K. I have been fiscally responsible to survive the trends throughout the years. My business is connected in and relies on rural communities. I have been able to adapt and modify my business model, and I bring the knowledge to the municipality. My 4 years on council has allowed me to be involved with the 10-year vision strategic plan, recreational master plan, and development plan. My vision is to have collaboration between residents and government to create a progressive planning strategy. This partnership will ensure that Springfield continues to be a vibrant, exciting community, attracting businesses, and maintaining a sustainable, healthy environment, a result that matters. I am currently Deputy Reeve for the municipality and have served on a variety of committees. The scope of the committees that I have served on has broadened my knowledge and experience in this very diverse municipality. Being a business owner allows me flexibility in my work schedule to meet the needs of residents and commitments in this municipality. Thank you.
David, introduce yourself and explain what motivates you, what qualifies you, and what your vision is.
Testing. Great, thanks, Linton. Folks, thanks very much for coming out today. My name is David Duval, running in Ward 2. I am an associate professor at the University of Winnipeg. I teach in the Faculty of Business and Economics. I've been there since 2011. Before that, I was based out of a fairly large university in New Zealand, also in a school of business for almost 10 years now, or for 10 years in New Zealand. So, Linton mentioned vision. One of the things with vision is that vision has to be forward-thinking. And one of the things that we often talk about with our students is that any vision statement has to be forward-thinking. We don't have a properly crafted vision statement for where this municipality is going to be in 5 to 10 years. I think we should be very easily in the top 3 of jurisdictions, municipal jurisdictions, for where people would want to live and where businesses would want to actually set up shop. What do we have to do to get ourselves to that point? My experience in working with government, I've worked with federal governments here and in New Zealand. I've worked with local governments, largely in New Zealand. I've got some experience working with the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce. I've done some business advising in my time through the Business Development Bank of Canada. And all of these things combined, I think, will help the municipality really propel itself forward over the next number of years. So I'm really excited by this potential opportunity. When we first moved here, my wife she's from Toronto, and she was taking our daughter. It was the early spring, and our daughter convinced my wife that we should go to they should go to the Elm Park area there and just to play on the swings, because there wasn't that much snow. So my wife gets stuck in the parking lot. And she calls me, of course, and I'm home, and she says, can you come get us? So I hang up, sure, that's fine, I'll be right there. And I put on my boots, start heading out to the car. Phone rings again. Don't worry, there's a fella here with a truck who's got chains. He'll pull me out, and he's just pulled me out. That's the kind of community that we wanted to live in, and I was pleased that it happened, because it was kind of funny that she got stuck. It was pleased that it happened, because that's the kind of community that I would like to serve, with that kind of mentality. So I look forward to chatting with you a little bit more for the rest, but I'll turn it over to Howard now.
Howard, please introduce yourself and say what motivates you, what qualifies you, and what your vision is.
Hi, my name's Howard Burdine, and some of you know me as Howie if you've been around a while, and that's okay. You can call me Howie. In fact, some people say I'm more of a Howie than a Howard, and that's probably true. I just turned 55 years of age, and so I really like going to restaurants now because I get better deals on the food there, and so that's been a good thing about being 55. I've lived in Springfield for almost actually over 50 years. I attended elementary school, Oakbank Elementary. I spent time here, the 3 years that you're supposed to spend here in junior high school. Loved playing floor hockey in this gym. And also I enjoyed the band program an awful lot, and that gave me a lot of love for music. And so, and then I finished high school at SCI, and then I spent 1 year in Edmonton at the North American Baptist College, where I was in the Diploma of Church Music program. And so I love directing choirs, and that's where I got that love of that as well. I'm married to my wife Pam for 29 years on November the 11th. And guys, it's a good thing to get married on the November 11th because you don't forget, you always remember your wedding anniversary. I've got two great sons, David and Daniel. I farmed for 37 years here in the RM of Springfield with my father and brother. And my brother and I ran H&D Farm and Auto Supply, which was just down the road here, just south of Oakbank, for 20 years. And so that gives you a little bit about my background. My motivation, I've had a number of people over the last number of years suggest that I run for council or for some political office. And so it's always been in the back of my mind to do that. I thought I would like to serve in public office, and I thought I could probably do not a bad job. In fact, I used to tell my wife when I turned 30 that I was going to do it at 30, and then I told her I was going to do it at 40, and then I told her I was going to do it at 50. But I soon realized with my farm and business and family obligations that that wasn't going to be possible. But right now, I've decided, our family, to shut down our farm operation, and so this was our last year. And so after 125 years of my mom's side of the family farming in Springfield, we're bringing that to an end. And so now I have the opportunity to serve my community as a full-time council person. So I'm looking forward to do that and allow that time to do a good job for you as the residents of Springfield. So what qualifies me? I have served and led on various boards and committees throughout my adult life, a lot in the farming area, in the political area, and also in my church here at Oakbank. And I've been sometimes chair of boards and sometimes just a committee member, so I think I've seen both sides of chairing a meeting and also cooperating and working well in a meeting. Having lived in Springfield for a long time, I've had contact with probably hundreds and even thousands of residents while we were in business. I just met a lot of people from Enola, Dugald, Oakbank, Hazel Ridge, wherever, and had a lot of contact with people. I go to the coffee shops, I sit with the farmers, and I've spoken with them. And so I think just my being around has given me a good understanding of where people are at in Springfield and what they're thinking. My vision. I think what I would really like to see and be part of is a council that works together in a unified fashion to see things move forward. To me, that would just be a great thing. I've just heard of a town that didn't even have an election because all their councillors and mayor were acclaimed because apparently they do a good job as a team and nobody wanted to run against them. That would be a neat way of getting a second term, but we'll see if we can get a first term first of all. So I would like Springfield to be a place where people want to live, to work, and to play. And basically, I've lived here almost all my life. I've worked here all my life, and I've played here as well. Thank you.
Suzanne, please introduce yourself and tell us what motivates you, qualifies you, and your vision.
Hello, I am Suzanne Wilkes. I grew up in Springfield on a dairy farm where teamwork coupled with hard work and common sense got the job done. I attended 3 levels of schooling provided in Springfield, enjoyed 4-H, where I learned to curl at the Dougal Curling Club, and I have lived in Springfield for 56 years, together with my husband of 30 years. We own a small herd of cattle, along with a horse, a couple of pigs, and a handful of chickens. Why I ran, I watched the elections for the past years, thinking one day I would have my turn to serve my community. I am proud to live in Springfield, where residents can enjoy wide open spaces, variety of landscapes, and the proximity of Birds Hill Park and the city of Winnipeg. What qualifies me is I feel I have a variety of skills. I've been a manager, I communicate effectively, use common sense, project planning, budget, listening skills, teamwork, and years of experience in a variety of fields, including policing, transport, and agriculture. My vision for Springfield is a proud farming community with pockets of aggregate, industrial, commercial, and residential areas that is able to live within its means. The resources to support a thriving, robust population, fresh, safe, pristine water, with all levels of schooling, recreational facilities, senior housing, so families can grow and stay in one place. A place where the commercial, industrial, and technical industries can grow with and for the community, supporting our tax base and employment needs.
Thank you. Jason, please introduce yourself, speak to what motivates you, what qualifies you, and your vision for the RM.
Hi, I'm Jason Franklin. I live here in Ward 2 with my wife and my 2 daughters. What motivated me to run for council is to make my community better for my children and hopefully their children too. I want to serve my community. I feel this is the best way to do it. What qualifies me for this role? Well, let's start with the fact that, like the rest of you, I'm a taxpayer. Myself and my family have been involved in numerous activities and groups within the RM, including being a member of the RM Recreation Committee, where I worked hard to increase the grant levels given to our community clubs by over 200%. Through my career as an account manager, I have managed multi-million-dollar budgets and feel this experience would transfer well over to the role of councillor. My vision for the RM is affordable taxes, increased development, both residential and commercial, throughout the RM, safer streets, and more recreational options, including a rec center for the town of Oakbank. Thank you.
Thank you. On to question 2. The order for this question will be Howie, Jason, Susie, Glenn, David. Question 2, what do you see as the top 3 priorities for council? Howard.
All right. There's a lot of different things we could look at, obviously, but I kind of made mine about building trust between council and the people. And so the first thing that I'd like, the first priority or the first thing I'd like to have council look at, if they would listen to my suggestion, would be to examine the expenses of council. I know there's been some articles in the local newspaper lately, and rightly or wrongly, it has left a perception that council maybe is not watching their expenses properly. And so I would just like us to have a conversation, to check our policies, to see if we're doing what we can, that we're saving money for the taxpayer personally and our own expenses that we have. So that would be, I think, the first one that I would like to be. And basically, if we can't be trusted in the little things, people aren't going to trust us in the big things. And I've been taught that since a little boy. And so I think that's something that I would like to see. Then the idea of fair representation. The RM has been instructed to review how our residents are being represented and what changes need to be made in the idea of ward boundaries or councillors possibly. I know right now in Ward 2, the ward that the 3 of us are running in, we have about 30% of the population and only 1 councillor is representing that 30%. So I think in order to gain the trust of the people, we need to make the changes that bring fair representation to everybody who's in the municipality. And then my third priority would be to move forward with a development plan. I think it's a guide to the future for Springfield. I think it's going to set a new course, and it gives council direction in many areas. And once it's set out there, we know what the direction are, and we can move forward and see our municipality flourish in that way.
Thank you. Jason. Your top 3 priorities.
You know, if you asked 100 people right now what the number one priority in the RM is, you probably get about 100 different answers. But I believe the number one priority of council, period, should keep your taxes as low as possible, without losing any services, eliminating or reducing any services. I think that's the number one thing council should always be working for. To do that, we have to grow our tax base. That's the only way to keep your taxes low. The second would be public safety. We're seeing a lot of crime into the rural areas, into Oak Bank. I think we need to transition our police force away from giving tickets to more of a crime prevention role. And then you're going to hear this a lot from me. The third one is in Oak Bank, we need our recreation center. We've been talking about this for 15 years. We've gone over 3 different plans. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we have nothing on the ground. I think we need to get that done. Thank you.
Suzanne, please give us your top 3 priorities for council.
Top 3 priorities for me would be pass a development plan 3rd reading, establish goals for the next 1 to 4 years, setting priorities and establishing a firm direction so secondary planning can take place, review the financial budget, and review bylaws to ensure they are reflecting the current municipal needs.
Thank you. Glenn, your top 3 priorities.
My top three priorities are economic development. An economic development plan is important to attract businesses to the municipality, and creating an attractive marketing plan will entice businesses' development to Springfield. In the proposed development plan, there is designation for employment lands for commercial and industrial use. This is important for our business sector to grow. We must not make this our only focus. We also need to create a plan for the retail sector within our communities. This will allow jobs to be created. We are in the process of hiring an economic development officer, which will help develop and grow our business relationships with existing businesses, and Springfield Chamber of Commerce. Affordable housing is my second priority. A strategic plan is required to plan for and provide affordable housing in Springfield to engage and accommodate the needs of young families in Springfield and to support the aging population, to stay active and living in our community. Thirdly, communication. Communication is imperative to keep the community informed and involved. This could be done by quarterly newsletters, the RM website, and open houses. Residents can sign up on the RM of Springfield website to stay current. A team approach to include council, administration, and community members is important to move in a positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you. David, your top 3 priorities, please.
Well, I'm going to agree with a lot of what's been said. First and foremost, we need an economic development strategy. The entire objective function of an economic development strategy is to grow the tax base, first and foremost. So I'm going to agree with, I think Glenn said that, and a few others have mentioned it as well. What's interesting about an economic development strategy is that you have to understand, and this would be my second priority, you have to understand what your competitive advantage is. Those of you who are in business will understand this. You have to understand, how are you competing with your competitor? Is it cost? Is it focus? Is it differentiation? The kind of common factors that we think about when we talk about business strategy. The same applies to a municipality. It absolutely does. We are competing with other jurisdictions, other municipalities, including the city of Winnipeg. Why would a company, why would they want to relocate to Springfield? What are we selling? That has to be sorted out in conjunction with and parallel to an economic development strategy, which sits alongside the current development plan. The third priority would be to ensure that we're embarking upon a program of good governance. And good governance is about evidence-based policy. This is work that I've been involved with as an academic. And academics, we often sit in the background. You don't hear from us. And a highlight is, for instance, when your work gets referenced on the floor of the House of Commons. It really is. It's a highlight. But it means that governments are looking at evidence. They're taking the objective function of whatever policy they're crafting and saying, do we have the right evidence to be able to say that this is what our policy is going to be? That would be my third priority, a lasting priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Question number 3 relates to fiscal management. Please comment on, sorry, I should give you your order first. It's going to be Suzanne, Howard, Jason, Glenn, and David. Please comment on fiscal management and budgetary policy at the RM. What changes, if any, would you make regarding fiscal policy and practices? And are there any areas where you would increase or decrease expenditures? Suzanne.
Thank you. Any suggestions for me would be premature, but I do have questions on the actual current fiscal budget. The dust abatement per year is over 500,000. The garbage collection per year is 1.5 million. The animal and pest control of 40,000 is a shared cost with St. Clements. I'm thinking we could probably do something better. Budgetary policy should be to have the budget plan set out by the end of the year and fine-tuned by May so we can have most of the items financially accounted for.
Thank you. Howard, your views on fiscal management and budgetary policy.
I'm going to tell you a little story first. Was on a plane flying back from Mexico a few years ago when our family took a holiday, and they always work it this way. There's 4 in our family. My wife and my 2 boys sit together, and they stick me with the other people because I'm the talker in the family. Well, I had the opportunity to sit with the mayor of Thompson, Mr. Fensky, and for that 5-hour flight, I think it seemed to only take 20 minutes. I either talked his ear off, that's what my family tells me, or I think he talked my ear off. But I learned something from the mayor of Thompson, and he had sat on council, and then he had also become the mayor. And he said, you have to sit on the other side of the desk to get the whole picture. And so I could probably stand here and pick out some things that I could be critical for in regards to how the council maybe looked after some of the expenses or I didn't agree with, or I could come and tell you that I'm going to increase this budget and that budget and find out that I have total egg on my face when that is not possible. So my goal is basically, if I get to be councillor, would be to sit down, listen to all the facts and the figures that are presented, take the business knowledge that I've learned, try to see how we can cut costs, or sometimes cutting costs isn't the best way. Spending a little more money and having a better job done is also another way that sometimes needs to be done. So I'm just going to say that my whole job is to sit down, wisely and fairly look over the situation and try to come up with the best policies with the rest of council, with saving money or maybe making some money for the municipality in another way.
Thank you. Jason, please speak to fiscal management and budgetary policy at the RM.
It's funny, Howard kind of stole a lot of what I was thinking. I think the RM, so far from what I've read of their financials, they're doing a reasonably good job of managing your money. There's a couple lines in their financials I would like to know more about, and I think that's the discussion you got to have with the people that are in charge of those departments. Like for roads, if you look at roads, we've decreased spending by about 5% over the last 4 years. Maybe it's just we've figured out a better way to do it. I know there's a couple roads that could use some work, and I'm sure you all know 1 or 2 that you could recommend to me. I'd also like to understand why our gravel revenue has not changed since 2013. That number's been flat for over 5 years. I think we have a resource. I think we could do better with it. We need to get those pits assessed, figure out what they're worth, see if owning them is the right thing to do. And the last one, it's a tiny one, but it gets a lot of looks out there, is expenses by council. I think your wage is your wage. I don't think anybody should be getting any extra money for being on council. You should only be covered for your out-of-pocket expenses like gas if you're going to a meeting, but you should get an hourly rate. Those are pennies, but again, if you can't manage the small things, you can't manage the big things. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn, please speak to fiscal management and budgetary policy.
Regarding fiscal management and the budgetary policy, it is important to be proactive. Start the budgeting process early, setting goals for the 5-year capital projects that are responsible, achievable, and attainable, and being accountable to the process. Fiscal responsibility is paramount for any organization, and the municipality is no different. Providing opportunities, for example, an open house for the community to be involved in the process, to discuss, ask questions, and offer suggestions on what their needs are. Having a budget done early allows the time and opportunity to find competitive pricing. Thank you.
Thank you. David, please speak to fiscal management and budgetary policy.
I have to say I agree with Howard 100%, and I agree with Jason. Good financial management is about having sound financial policy. And you can only have sound financial policy when you have good governance backing it up. I actually have taken, in the last little while or so, since about the end of summer, watching very carefully what the municipality is doing with respect to asset management. It's a remarkable thing that they're undertaking. We have a huge municipality. We have to understand what our asset base is, particularly as it relates to transportation. We've got to figure out, for instance, and we could, if you think about the technologies that is available and the data that we can accumulate, we can figure out, for instance, the hotspot for certain roads 10 years in advance. So we can start thinking very carefully about where resources have to be diverted in the future. So I'm excited by what's been started with respect to asset management, and that would be a key part of financial management, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question relates to the development plan, and the sequence will be Suzanne, Glenn, Howard, no, that's the last one, sorry. Jason, Franklin, David, Howard, Susan, Glenn. So Jason, David, Howard, Susan, Glenn. Got to hit the button. What is your view of the proposed development plan is the question.
Well, I see no big issues with the current development plan. I know we've been working on this current one for about 4 years, and there was another one that they pretty much threw in the garbage. I think we've had a lot of input from all the stakeholders, and they've done their best to incorporate changes that make sense to residents of Springfield. I would have liked to see more future residential development on the borders with the city of Winnipeg. Other RMs like East St. Paul have really led the way in taking advantage of these areas and helped increase their tax base, and I think we could do the same, but we don't need to redo the plan. I think it's important that we move it forward and we tweak it as we go. Thank you.
Thank you. David, the proposed development plan.
I think the development plan as it currently exists, it's time to move on with it. I support the idea of creating secondary development plans because that targets our high-value pieces of property in the municipality. I think that's the right move forward. I'm really encouraged by looking at the development plan for the opportunity to create a community development corporation. I think that community development corporation can be the next step from the Economic Development Office that's been proposed in the 2018 budget. That CDC, that development corporation, could operationalize as much as possible what the development plan enshrines, and also that previous economic development strategy that I suggested we need for this particular municipality. So yeah, development plan, 100% in support of it. Let's move on to the secondary plans, and then let's use all these documents together to propel this municipality forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Howard, please speak to the proposed development plan.
So I had the chance, I guess, or not chance, but actually through 3 different committees to be part of the process of thinking through some of this development plan. So I was on the Ag Advisory Committee, and so we were involved in talking to those leading those sessions. I was also part of the Chamber of Commerce at that time, so I sat in on those sessions. And then I also represented the churches in the area that had some concerns about what was in the development plan. So I had a little bit of time to see what was coming and going on. I attended most of the open houses when it didn't conflict with farming issues. And so I kind of been watching how this is going along. And I know that much time and effort has been spent on this process. I think it's time to move forward. I call this development plan 2.0 in my life because 1.0 happened during the 90s and into 2000s. And if some of you remember, H&D Farm and Auto used to be on Main Street in Oakbank, across from the car wash. And we rented that building. And after a couple of 3 years, we decided it would be better to build our own building instead of paying rent to somebody, that we would put that into an asset, right? And so we attempted at that time to buy some property, which we had a down payment on, which is today where the water pump sits, or the pumping house. I think that's what we call it, right at the corner of 206 and Springfield Road, across from the Tim Hortons. And the process just took too long. It had to be changed to commercial land, and I think one council changed to another, and finally our time ran out. And so I believe that held us back in our business probably 3 or 4 years. I know when we finally made the move to a mile south of town, our business grew in that first year just a big amount. And I think we'd have been that much sooner. So I think, and I don't know that there's any businesses waiting for this plan to get finished and new commercial areas, but I think the longer we waste time doing this, we turn down possible businesses. We have to be ready to move forward and go forward. So let's get this development plan going and moving.
Thank you. Suzanne, please speak about the proposed development plan.
Okay, a lot of work has gone into the consultation has taken place towards this plan. The feedback from Manitoba Highways and Manitoba Agriculture about the growth on valuable farmland should be considered, along with the urban sprawl, so infrastructure can be kept organized and reasonably priced.
Thank you. Glenn, the development plan.
The development plan has taken a long time to complete. It has been costly for Springfield. It is time to proceed forward. Over the course of many months, Council held 16 open houses at different stages of the plan to engage the community and hear input. It is currently under review from the province. There are objections to this plan that the province will make comments about and make recommendations to Council. Upon provincial approval, Council will bring it forth for the third reading. It will be my priority for Council to review the zoning bylaws and proceed with the secondary plans immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, the sequence will be Suzanne, Glenn, Howard, David, Jason. And the question is, what would be your policies regarding the role of Council in the economic development of the RM? Suzanne.
Thank you. Okay, the policies, role of Council would be to keep the taxes in check to attract businesses, advertise facilities or empty lots available, work with the Chamber of Commerce to see what they like and what changes they would like to see to attract more businesses, communicate with all affected residents and business owners to organize a list of potential types of businesses to attract, hiring of the Economic Development Officer, and try to attract more technical and art-orientated types of businesses.
Thank you. Glenn, economic development.
Policies regarding the role of Council in the economic development of the RM would be to treat new and existing businesses fairly, allowing the growth of the economy to employ people in the community, work with the Chamber of Commerce on attracting businesses to our community to increase employment opportunities, synergize on opportunities between the Chamber and the municipality. It is important to build a strategy that new businesses want to come and be a part of Springfield, and existing businesses do not want to leave the municipality. Increase the business portfolio of Springfield could benefit the residents by lowering taxes. This is a long-term benefit. We'll move Springfield forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Howard, economic development.
I can't disagree with the previous two at all, and so some of this will be repeats, but I think Council needs to be more business friendly, and that means making existing businesses' lives easier, also encouraging new businesses to start, being proactive and inviting, making sure that there are commercial industrial areas on the east side of the floodway, which the new development plan is addressing. And I really believe, I don't know how soon this will be, but someday I think we're going to lose the west side of the floodway, our commercial area, to annexation. It might be 50 years, it might be 100, but we need to be preparing for that and getting Springfield on the east side as well of the floodway, getting areas for commercial development. I like the idea of the economic development officer. I think there's a very good role for someone to do that and to be helping businesses out. Good working relationship with the Chamber of Commerce. I think talking to them, they know the heartbeat of the businesses in the area. They'll have things to help and suggest to the council, so I think that's very important. And I think councillors need to have their ears on the ground as well. They need to be out there if they're hearing about potential businesses coming to the municipality or looking for somewhere to move. They need to be out there hearing that, encouraging them to check out Springfield. And so I think it's a team effort to see Springfield grow in their economic development.
Thank you. David, economic development.
I would start with asking and trying to answer the question, how competitive are we? It goes back to some of my initial comments. I'd like to understand, for instance, why a firm might be interested in moving to Springfield. That might mean starting with existing commercial operators here in the municipality and ask them what was it that either made them or helped them decide come, or even potentially talk to others whom we know did not relocate into Springfield. So I'd like to know the answers to those questions. It's hard for a local government, it's hard for a provincial government or even a federal government to really get a handle on what they should be doing. In my field, it's in the commercial aviation field, and the dirty kept secret that we'll all share, we won't spread beyond this gym, is that a lot of times governments subsidize aviation. Governments subsidize airlines in certain instances. You might be surprised to know that. It's not uncommon for municipalities and governments around North America to look at ways of incentivizing businesses to set up here. I'm not suggesting that we go quite that far just yet, but it should be something we think about. Let's start with this Community Development Corporation. Let's start with that. Let's start with looking at funding an incubator that I know our current Reeve mentioned last week. I'd like to look at it from the context of an agribusiness incubator, maybe even partnering with the University of Manitoba. And because I work at the University of Winnipeg, don't tell my boss that. But let's look at doing those kinds of things. Let's look at finding ways of directly supporting companies that are interested in coming into this municipality. What can we do, to follow on what Howard said, what can we do to make things easier for them? Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, economic development.
I believe the role of the RM is to actively seek ways to attract business to the RM. And one of the ways they can easily do that is start working closer with groups like the Chamber of Commerce and other groups that can help us direct policies that are more business friendly. We need to sell our advantages to those companies that are looking to expand or relocate. We have lower taxes. We have a skilled workforce. We're close to the city. We have lots of area, lots of land to spread out on. We need to sell that to them. And lastly, on the business development manager, development officer they're looking to hire, we must have set targets of growth if we're going to hire a position. We can't just hire someone. And we have to give them the tools to hit that. So whether they're able to come to us as a council and change bylaws or do what's necessary, or even as David kind of hinted at, incentivize companies to move into the area. They have to have that ability to do that, or we won't see any growth. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question, the sequence will be Suzanne, Glenn, David, Howard, and Jason. And it's question 6. Please give your views regarding prioritizing or balancing. Can you flick that? That might be. Prioritizing or balancing commercial industrial development needs versus residential needs and interests. Please comment regarding economy, lifestyle, relative costs, and benefits to the RM, its business, and residents. You have 3 minutes for this one if you would like to use it. Go ahead.
Thanks. I would like to see buffer zones between the two entities where possible. Both are interdependent on the other. Residents need employment and companies need employees. Taxes collected can solve infrastructure needs and schooling. The balance in this is needed for long-term growth.
Thank you. Glenn, commercial and industrial needs versus residential needs.
With respect to balancing commercial and industrial development needs versus residential needs and interests, we have to manage the growth in both areas. Increasing businesses in the municipality will increase the tax base and will provide employment for community members. Providing employment opportunities is attractive to residents in Springfield and is also a draw for new people to move to our municipality. Creating jobs supports community and allows people to work close to where they live. Affordable housing suggests community members on both ends of the spectrum, supplying recreational opportunities, reworking, adding on to current structures, perhaps with business sponsorship, is important to meet the needs of the ever-changing municipality. It is up to council to stay aware of the needs of the municipality and make changes as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. David, you're up on commercial industrial needs versus residential needs.
This is the balancing equation between these two groups is something that lots of municipalities have wrestled with, and the literature tells us, and the literature in governance and business tells us that it's a fine line. I'd like to involve two groups in helping us achieve this balance. One would be the Springfield Chamber of Commerce. The other would be, believe it or not, Economic Development Winnipeg. I have some contacts there, and they've been through this because their job is to sell Winnipeg. And when they're selling Winnipeg, they have to keep in mind that they're often looking at balancing the interests between residents and between commercial interests that are coming in. So I'd like to involve those two groups quite carefully in addressing this question. The last thing I would say is that I'd also like to talk to the folks and the businesses, for instance, that have already set up in Ward 1. I'd like to get a sense from them in terms of the service delivery that they're getting from the municipality. Do they feel that they're getting value for money? This goes back to evidence-based policy. Let's start with getting some data and getting some evidence and then work on the balance from there. Then survey residents and asking them the exact same question. Let's make it scientific as much as we can, and let's find the information that we need in order to make this balancing equation very kind of a teeter-totter, but as balanced as we possibly can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Howard, please speak to commercial and industrial needs versus residential needs.
Okay, so I think both of them go hand in hand. They're both important. We need them for a balanced economy and a balanced municipality. So we need residential housing of all different types, and I'd like to see more rental housing for people who are just getting into a job market, houses and apartments both, single and first-time homeowners. I've got a couple of boys that hopefully one day will get married, and then they need to buy a house, and they can't afford a $500,000 house, so they're going to need some affordable housing, and I'd like to see more of that in the RM and in Oak Bank, or Ward 2 in particular. Family homes, we have lots of those, and I hope that continues in that middle range. And then we need seniors housing as well. Condos, we have a number of developments already, apartments, assisted living, personal care. I talked about my boys. I've got parents who are getting older. I'm not pushing them out yet, but out of the farm, but they're going to need that type of thing coming up in the future. So anyway, we need that balance, and we need more commercial and industrial areas because they provide job opportunities. They give us a stronger tax base, and they also meet the service industries that we need, and that's a growing area, stores and more garage stations and whatever. We need more of those in the area as well. So I think both of these are important for us to grow in, and they'll also provide us more recreational things. Jason was talking about a rec center. I'm a little more modest. I've talked about a community hall in Oak Bank, Ward 2 to start out with, but maybe that could be phase one of a bigger building, but I think a community hall would be great to bring people back together like it used to be, where we would have activities, wedding socials and weddings, and elections were held there, and yoga classes, or whatever the different things that could be held. And maybe it could be a gym like this, designed that way, and there could be floor hockey, volleyball for kids. So we need tax base to grow in order to do that. So I just think both are hand in hand, and that's what we need for a good community.
Thank you. Jason, commercial and industrial needs versus residential needs.
Thank you. I think the RM's done a good job so far balancing commercial and residential growth in the RM as a whole. However, I feel that we are missing it when it comes to good balance within our towns. Main Street in Oakbank is a good example of bad management, as we've taken out these large areas of commercially zoned land and replaced them with a couple apartment buildings. We need to be attracting businesses to our main streets to keep people in town and to grow. We also need to start developing the commercial zone between Dugald and Oakbank. I'm sure Howard would agree with this. You just have to go take a look at the commercial zone that's between Morden and Winkler and get a good feel of what, if you develop an area like that, what it could become. We also need to encourage more residential development outside of Oakbank. In the last 5 years, 89% of residential growth within the RM has been within Oakbank. At the ward forum in Enola last week, one of the candidates said, Enola needs a grocery store. She's right over there. And they do. But they need the population to support it, and we must work with all the areas to encourage growth to allow for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next question relates to, and I'm going to read you the whole question because this is a composite, just kill that mic, please. Thanks. I'm going to read the whole question because this is one that came in from people who sent it in to us for the questionnaire, and it regards agricultural versus residential concerns. So I'm going to read the whole thing. Please give your views regarding prioritizing or balancing agricultural concerns versus residential concerns. Please address issues such as farming, operations running equipment late at night, the continuous operation of dryers and fans, early morning applications and aerial applications, taxes paid versus benefit received from the RM, and education tax on farmland. There's a handful. David, you get this one first, followed by Howard, Jason, Suzanne, and Glenn.
I'm getting flashbacks to would have been the late 1980s, early 1990s, and I worked for a farm just south of 15 on the Perimeter Highway. So I've run grain trucks up and down Highway 15 and run the old TR-85s, New Hollands, where we didn't have hydrostatic drives. We actually had to use gears. So farming, obviously we're an agricultural community. We're an agricultural municipality. If anything, when we moved here with our young daughter, she was 3, we would stop at the side of the road or pull off onto a side road, and I would explain to her what some of the machines were doing. There's a lot of education that has to take place between folks who are not familiar with, for instance, where a lot of their bread comes from. So there's a lot of opportunity there, I think, for us to educate and then celebrate our agricultural history and celebrate the fact that we've had a type of municipality that we've had on the backs of those who've toiled in the fields. And I had a very small role to play with that 25 years or 30 years ago. That's where, in fact, Howard and I have a very distinct and long relationship with some mutual friends. So I think in terms of balancing those competing interests, a lot of that comes from education. I'm not sure that the interests are that diametrically opposed. I think both agricultural groups, residents, commercial interests, all would love to see this municipality prosper. And I think if we're all aligned with that, then it makes that balancing of competing interests that much more smaller. So I think that would be a very good starting point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Howard, agriculture and residential concerns.
Well, I think farmers and townspeople can get along, and I've been doing that for quite a few years, I think, unless I'm going to hear some, but you can't boo, that's right, so you can't say anything. So I think that when you move out to the country, and as when you leave, I think it stinks in the city sometimes too, so you will get smells in the country that you may not get in the city. They're there because that's how it's going to be. So I think you have to realize that when you move out, there are going to be the noises, the smells, and other irritants that could bother you. So that's something you have to understand when you move into a rural municipality. And the interesting thing, I thought about it a little bit, none of our communities, our little towns, are more than a mile away. If you live in one of them, you're not more than a mile away anywhere from a farmer's field. It's less, mostly, for most of you, half a mile. So you're all living really close to a farmer. And so they try their best. I've tried my best, and if you don't know where I lived right on the west side of town, and for the last number of years, I have been very careful about wind direction and when I spray. The northwest winds are your prevailing winds. Guess where most of my farmland was from Oakbank? The northwest side. And so as a farmer, I felt obligated to watch and be very careful about spraying. I didn't want to hurt my neighbor's crops. I didn't want to hurt your yards. So I think I was proactive in watching that. Running late at night, 2, 3 in the morning, sometimes we did that. Sometimes I got up at 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning to spray, because that's the only time a farmer can spray. The wind speeds are down. You may get a 4-hour from 5 till 9 in the morning and winds are up, can't spray anymore. So we may be making a little noise on the edge of town, but it's because we're spraying. It's the best opportunity for us to do that. Running grain dryers and fans. We had our fans pointing right into Oakbank. When the houses started coming close, we decided a smart thing would be is to turn the fans all inside. And so we spent some money and we turned our fans inside. And I don't think anybody complained about our fans running. And sometimes they ran for 24 hours a day for 7, 8, 9 days to dry our grain. So I think farmers try their best. I really believe that most of you don't live that close to a farmer because they're getting to be fewer and fewer. They're further out in Ward 5 and in Ward 4 and 3 and some in 1. But Ward 2, you don't have any farmers anymore. I was there, but now I can't say I'm a farmer anymore. But anyway, that's some of the things that farmers have to deal with. The taxes, farmers would like to see their taxes go for road maintenance and for drainage. And I've been working on that with a group of farmers for a while. It's very important for drainage to happen. The whole school tax, education tax, farmers really don't believe that we should have to pay school tax on every acre of land that we own, but we do, and my time is running out, but we would like to pay on our houses just like everybody else. I know that isn't totally the municipality's responsibility. The provincial government has that, but I hope as an RM we can keep pushing and seeing school tax coming off of farmland. Did I make it?
You're good.
Good.
Thank you. Because all 5 of you have been very concise and efficient, I've actually moved the time up to 3 minutes per question for these big questions here. So that's why you were okay. So we're still at 3 minutes. And the next speaker is Jason. And the issue is agricultural concerns and residential concerns.
I'd like to start by thanking Howard. We were one of the first houses to move in on Kyra. So he was right behind us, and his combines would come right up to my land. And we had no complaints, and that's really the key to it. I've never heard anybody in Ward 2 complain about the farms around, other than my daughter when it stinks once in a while, but that's life. As far as the taxes go, I totally understand. Everybody wants their taxes lower. On the educational side, I know the provincial government's moved to an 80% refund. That's up 47%. On farmland since 2004, so they're going in the right direction. But every dollar you take out of school taxes from somewhere, it's got to come from somewhere else. So that's all I've got to say on that.
Suzanne, please talk about agricultural versus residential concerns.
Okay, once again, buffer zones are nice, but most farming operations are good neighbors and usually are seasonal. This is a farming community, but without residential growth, the community would be lacking in services and schools and other facilities. Education tax has been reduced on farmland, but it still has a way to go. I urge the incoming school board to take a fine-tooth comb through their budget and reuse and reinvent to find solutions to problems and needs.
Thank you. Glenn. agricultural versus residential concerns.
Well, Howard, I'd have to agree with you. You know, I live inside the perimeter and there's a farm, agricultural land, just north of me, very close. I support agriculture equipment running late at night and aerial applications early in the morning. Farmers have a short season that is impacted by Mother Nature. As a matter of survival, farmers will have to take care of their fields or crops in early and late in the day. We as residents have to be understanding, as this is necessary for all to have food on the table. It is vital we have prosperous farmers and a fair tax system. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, question 8, is please, the order will be Suzanne, Jason, David, Glenn, Howard. Question 8 is please comment on infrastructure, especially roads and drainage. What would be your policies and approach? How high a priority is it? What would be your approach with respect to RM advocacy with the province regarding costs of infrastructure maintenance? Suzanne.
Hello. Roads are the lifeblood of the municipality, making them a priority. We have federal funds like gas tax that aid in the upkeep in these, and we're looking for more from the government. Drainage has been addressed on a priority basis according to severity, flooding issues, municipal funds available, funding from other sources like the Floodway Authority, and consultations with Cooks Creek Conservation, working towards plans in place and phases of proposed plans to be completed.
Thank you. I've just crashed my phone. I forget who's next. Anybody remember? Thank you, Jason. Please comment on infrastructure, roads, and drainage.
Okay, I'm going to be real quick on this one. This is one of the main duties of the RM is to take care of the roads and the ditches. It is mandated by the Municipal Act. We have to do it and should do it to the best of our ability. At the same time, we must lobby all levels of government to get every single dollar we can to help do this job. Thank you.
Thank you. David, infrastructure, roads, and drainage.
So I have to apologize for wandering around. When I teach at the U of W, I am pacing and wandering up and through, so it's natural inclination. There's one long-term issue that I think we need to address in Springfield, and that is capitalizing or operationalizing, I should say, the brand new transportation master plan. That was written by a friend of mine at Stantec, Bob. And Bob and I have talked about it over the years. Obviously, he couldn't reveal a lot about it, but we've talked about this notion of municipalities working together. So we need to start working very closely with the City of Winnipeg and other municipalities to make sure that we're planning, and this is 10 years out, planning for goods to market, people to jobs from this part of the municipality, and of course coming from Winnipeg the other way. So I'd like us to move forward on planning for that. Another issue that's a little more closer to home and a little more pressing is something I've been hearing from residents when I've been chatting with folks, and some of you are here in Ward 2, and that is what to do with Willow and Main. I have to say that as a transport guy, I'm not 100% sure I have the answer, but I think I know what questions have to be asked. So I'd like us to explore the nature of how much vehicular traffic have we got going through that intersection, and whether or not some degree of control is necessary, and how do we balance that against this idea of having a pedestrian crosswalk there, which is used by a lot of your kids, and not mine because we're a little further north, but used by a lot of kids. The other thing that I've been toying with in the back of my mind, because the Provincial Transportation and Traffic Modernization Act was given royal assent 2 months ago now, we have the authority in this municipality, and so does every other municipality, to set speed limits in certain roads. And I've heard from some residents that they would like us to consider, as a municipality, shifting some of those speed limits. One of them I've thought of, and I haven't mentioned it to too many people, but is what to do with maybe taking some of the 50-kilometer-an-hour speed limits on some of the local side streets here in Oakbank and dropping that down to 30. The City of Calgary is already thinking about doing that very thing. And the reason I would suggest that this might not be a bad idea is that because you and I we all see lots of kids wandering to school. So I start worrying about having a speed limit of 50 kilometers an hour. And like a lot of you, I drive at 30 kilometers an hour in and around the town simply because there are lots of people out. We're a walking town. Lots of people are still walking. So it's something I've been thinking about. It will need resident input. I would love input from other members of council and, of course, our Reeve. But it would need public input to at least start that discussion and see if it's a path that we would like to go down. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Glenn. Please talk about infrastructure, roads, and drainage.
It is imperative to maintain our roadways so that they are safe roadways to travel on. Emergency vehicles must have access to all residents and businesses. Proper drainage is needed to prevent homes and fields from flooding. Proper planning and budgeting dollars must be sufficient to make sure safety is priority on roads. To maintaining the culverts so water flows adequately. The asset management program software approved by council is a tool used by administration to manage all infrastructure from capital reserves for replacement and maintenance in a timely manner. It is important to have funding from all levels of government and at the adequate planning be shovel ready to begin a project. Thank you.
Thank you. Howard, infrastructure, roads, and drainage.
So whether you're rural or urban, roads and drainage, I believe, are important to all of us. And this is one of the important areas that all municipal governments have to give a lot of attention to and are tasked with. And so we need to have funding in these areas to keep these roads going, these ditches clean. And so that takes money, and I think we need to be always aware of the infrastructure programs that the different levels of government are offering so we can jump on them and help us to maintain our ditches and our roads. Also, though, we need to be aware that sometimes nature sends us curveballs, and when you get a 5 or 6 inch rain, the best drainage in the municipality for the farmers won't work because your ditches will back up and flood on your fields. And also, if you live in Ward 2 and Oakbank, I have seen canoes paddling down the street a few years ago when we had such a rainstorm. So we need to realize that even when we do our best, there's going to be times when you'll be mad at the municipality and you're going to phone your councillor, but he didn't send the 5 or 6 inches of rain. So just remember, we're not always set up for those type of acts of nature. So anyway, I would put that as a high priority. Some of you know that I was on the Ag Advisory Committee, so from the rural aspect, I was very concerned about drainage, but I have talked to people as I've gone door to door, and I find there are drainage issues in town as well. And to what David was saying, as my wife and I have been going door to door, and she follows me in the car and waits for me, if you're wondering who that stalker is on the end of your street, it's my wife. She says people speed in Oak Bank, so that is an issue that could be addressed as well. So I've seen it myself now.
Keep that mic, Howard, because you're up first, followed by Jason, David, Glenn, and Suzanne. And the next question is about water, the supply and security of our water. Please comment on managing the risks to the quality and quantity of water in the future, specifically how you view future residential, agricultural, and industrial practices as they relate to water. Howard.
All right. So of course, we need a safe supply and a clean supply of water for our residents, and we need to keep monitoring and maintaining our water supply to ensure that safety. Now, previous councils have laid out a framework for managing, and they have initiated studies which will help future councils. The 10-year Springfield Vision Plan that was set out in 2017 highlighted 2 strategic goals related to water. They said, first of all, that protecting sustainable water resources, and then creating infrastructure resiliency. So I think that means to have good, strong infrastructure that lasts a long time. It's kind of a big word for a farmer, but I think I figured it out. So I think those are important. And it's going to be important that future councils not only read this thing, but also act on it and make sure that we put these words on paper to action. Also, we need to view the proper funding of water infrastructure, and that as we view that infrastructure, it is an investment in the future of our community. So sometimes those monies need to be spent because it's for future investment. And we also need to look for opportunities to partner with other levels of government, be it provincial or federal, where we can get money to help in this doing the maintenance, the building of new projects. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Jason, water.
I totally agree with everything Howard said. I think the RM has done a great job so far managing our water sources. If you get a chance, you could go on their website. They run a report. It's about 25 pages every year. They go over all the testing they do, what they think the wells will last, where the upgrades need to be done. I think they're doing a great job, and we just got to keep on top of that. Water supply as it goes for Ward 2, then we start to talk about the treated water supply, and that becomes a little bit of an emotional topic depending on who you talk to. On that topic, I think we need to revisit what we expect from people who are hooking up to the system in the future and how we mitigate that cost to them. It's a big change for somebody that's on a well going on to a public system and getting a bill every month. So I think we need to work with our local residents and make that a little less painful. Thank you.
Thank you. David, water.
Well, count me as ×3 for what was been said. And Jason brought up the issue of Ward 2 and water, municipal water. I'm a supporter of that for a number of reasons. Number one, water is a natural resource, is a key part of infrastructure. If we're going to grow the municipality, expand the tax base, have this economic development strategy that I keep talking about, water is absolutely fundamental as part of that. We also have to look at it as a safety issue. We also have to look at it in the context of the Groundwater Well Act, which if you read it a certain way, if you take kind of a academic approach to these kinds of things, you would suggest, it could be suggest, that the province could actually make us look at implementing municipal water systems, even though we're not necessarily ready for it. And finally, I would suggest that, just as Jason argued, and I agree with this, we have to find a way to make sure that the cost for these kinds of systems, and I'm talking about Oakbank, because that's where, as Jason mentioned, the issue is quite contentious. We have to make sure that the cost is shared. It's not entirely borne by the municipality, it's not entirely borne by residents, but it's shared. The federal government, because water is a natural resource that's contained within the Constitution, it's devolved down into the provincial levels, every level of government will be interested and involved and should be involved in ensuring that costs are shared, because as a resource, it's absolutely fundamental. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Glenn, water.
The water supply and security is priority, and risk management is essential to protecting this resource. The development plan includes policies to protect the type of water development near aquifers and recharge areas. The wells near the decommissioned landfill site are being monitored for water quality. Residents, agriculture, and industry need to be mindful of resources of contamination, which affect our water sources, and take action to protect this resource. Thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne, water.
Okay. There is a groundwater protection plan in place, and I would like to see open pit mining limit aquifer exposure by stopping any new dredging from exposing aquifers, by taking water table depths and restricting digging prior to these levels. This is a provincially regulated industry, and more work is needed to accomplish protection against bird defecation and mining pollution from entering our water supply. We do have a well on the west side of Springfield that East St. Paul accesses, but is regulated by the province and not in our control. There are limits to its usage, and East St. Paul usage reports are filed annually with the province.
Thank you, Suzanne. Please keep that mic, because you've got first draw on question 10, and that refers to what would be your plan with respect to ward boundaries. How many wards would you have? Suzanne.
I feel it would be good to have an odd number of seats in council for voting ease. I think all wards, including Ward 2, should be redesigned to encompass urban with rural properties to keep a nice balance and input from all levels.
Thank you. Glenn, then it's going to be David, Jason, and Howard. Glenn, you're up, please.
Current ward boundaries do not reflect fair representation based on population. Ward boundaries could be realigned to distribute population to current wards, or an additional ward could be created. Each solution comes with costs associated with redistribution or realignment. Having an even number of councillors, Reeve, as we have 6, has created several tied votes, 3 and 3. The results are that the resolutions do not pass. This also comes at a cost. Decisions cannot be made impeding the RM from moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. David, please speak to the ward boundaries and the number of wards.
So fair representation is actually guaranteed through the Municipal Act, and it's actually more widely, it's guaranteed by the Supreme Court of Canada in something what's called the Saskatchewan reference back from the 1980s. I think the question now is, what should the ward boundaries look like? We know that we're owed fair representation as residents of a municipality. What should the wards look like? So there's lots of options on the table. I had a look at Hanover. Hanover as a municipality is roughly the same as us. They're smaller. They're not as big as we are, but they have one extra councillor. So that as an option should be looked at. We could also look at the option of getting rid of wards altogether. That certainly has been the pathway that some municipalities have favored. I'm not going to give you an answer tonight because it goes back to the statement I made at the very beginning. Let's talk about evidence-based policy. I have a lot more questions about the cost implications of adding an extra councillor. What is the objective function of the exercise? Is it to get better governance for residents? How would that be achieved if we added an extra councillor or took one away? How would that be achieved, for instance, if we got rid of the ward system? How would it be achieved if we split Oakbank right down the middle? But I do agree that we've got a situation where we have a town where, as Howard mentioned earlier, 30% of the population lives. They deserve fair representation because they're guaranteed it through the Municipal Act and by the Supreme Court. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jason, please talk about wards.
The Municipal Act is very clear on this. It says wards should be of equal population. It also states that, quote, community or diversity of interest can be taken into consideration when making ward boundaries. Basically what that's saying is that this idea that you could take a lump of Oakbank and put it in with a large rural area and even it out, theoretically doesn't work under the Municipal Act. So how do we fix that? My perfect answer isn't allowed under the Municipal Act, and we would have to lobby them. I would like us to go down to 3 councillors. One for Oakbank, one for Ward 1, and let's say a combination nearby, and one for the other one. I don't think we need 6 councillors for 15,000 people. And I think if you made your case with the board, you might be able to do that and save us some money in the long run. Thank you.
Howard, ward boundaries and number of wards.
Okay, so I agree with everybody else that we need fair representation, and I think each ward should have approximately the same amount of residents. So if Springfield has approximately 15,000 residents with 5 wards presently, that should mean 3,000 people represented per ward, if my math is right. So right now, Oakbank, Ward 2, has 4,700 residents, 4,700 population. So we are 30% of the municipality, and so therefore you could say that's not fair representation. So we have to deal with that, I believe, and how that looks, I'm open to discussing and looking at all different options that way. I also believe that we should have an uneven number on council. I don't particularly think it's a good thing to have tied votes. It keeps us from moving forward. So I thought I would check out some of the municipalities around us to see where they sit with their council. So St. Andrews has 6 councillors, 1 reeve. That's 7, uneven. Hanover has 6 councillors, 1 reeve. That's 7, uneven. Taché has 6 councillors, 1 reeve. 7, uneven. St. Clemens, 6 councillors, 1 reeve, uneven. Brokenhead, 4 councillors, 1 reeve, makes 5, uneven. East St. Paul and West St. Paul both have 4 councillors, 1 reeve, uneven. So just by looking around the municipalities around us that we are connected to me it would seem we should learn a lesson from them and help us make a decision on on going that direction. So I look forward to working with the public for public input and for good council discussion to see how we can also resolve this issue and figure out the best for the municipality of Springfield.
Thank you. Well, I said I would give you 10 questions for sure from the prepared list. I'm going to go to number 11, just because, again, you've been very concise and efficient. So you get rewarded with another question. And that's number 11. The order will be Jason, David, Glenn, Suzanne, Howard. What do you think is the appropriate level of community and public involvement with council, both at meetings and outside of council meetings? What are the methods by which input should be received and information disseminated? Jason.
You know, for the last 3 elections, I've heard the word transparency from almost every person who has run. Then not a word later. In fact, a lot of them won't even answer an email if you send them a question. I think at council meetings, I think the rules for public input are currently fine, and even though they do allow for some people to waste other people's times with some silly questions once in a while, I think we must allow the public to be heard. Outside of council meetings, I think we could do a lot better. I think we could have a guarantee on when we'll get back to people, when we can answer a question. I personally am in favor of monthly town hall-like meetings with the people in the ward to sit down, go over ideas, maybe solutions, and be able to talk to them directly outside of a structured situation. Thanks.
Thank you. David, community and public involvement.
So I think community and public involvement in the context of council is very much bi-directional. There has to be outreach from both the community, and there has to be outreach from both and from council as well. I agree with Jason. It's nice to have the public attend council meetings. In fact, some of the ones I attended in the summertime, there weren't a lot of people there, and some very important issues were being discussed, and some money was being spent, and we didn't hear a lot of resident input one way or the other. A couple of things I'd like to see. I'd like to go back to the survey that I mentioned. And because of my background in market research, I love a good survey that I can sink my teeth into and get a sense of what the community is thinking. I think that's a good way of gauging and assessing service delivery for residents and how pleased they are with what they're getting for the tax dollars that they're spending on a monthly basis or an annual basis. I would also like, because there is provision for this in the Municipal Act, I would love to have a youth member on council. I would love to have a senior student from SCI, for instance, come and sit with us as we deliberate. It's absolutely provision. In fact, we could even take it one step further and also have a shadow council. What better way to get youth involved and interested in what's happening in their backyard than to engage them directly? So I would love to see something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn, community and public involvement.
Delegations are allowed to attend council meetings to speak about their concerns, and are allotted 15 minutes to do so. All council meetings are open to the public. Increased communication, informing the public about the goings-on in council, newsletters, website, are appropriate measures to disseminate information. A short question period at the end of the council meeting might also be an opportunity to clarify information. Having open houses at least twice a year to have discussion with the community, give the opportunity to hear residents' concerns. Improvements to our website will ensure all community members are seeing the most accurate and up-to-date information. Thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne, community and public involvement.
Council chambers are adequate in size for meetings. Meetings are handled well, and there is time for everyone to speak. In my opinion, a resident would be best served by using methods such as posting info on an upgraded, easy-to-navigate website, advertising in the Clipper, or through emails, and by having more public meetings around budget creation time and any time their large projects are being proposed.
Thank you. Howard, community and public involvement.
Should turn it on, and then we'll start here. Okay, so I guess I've had fairly positive results when I have approached my counselors over the last 2 counselors that I've had, that as I've had issues to deal with, and they've always taken my phone call and helped me out through the situation, or in some cases said, okay, why don't you meet with council? So in those cases, when we have gone, and the latest one was a number of us farmers were concerned that our drainage issues weren't being answered, and so we had a delegation of about 30 people, and Glenn, I think I even asked for more than 15 minutes, and the council gave that to us, and I think we had 30 or probably longer, and we had 30 or 40 guys out talking with council, and the result was that an ag advisory committee was struck, and I've been serving on that for the last couple of years, and there's about 6 or 7 farmers and some council members on it. And so taking the initiative, calling my counselor, taking a delegation to council works as well, but I think we can also be open to new ideas. I had some of my own, but listening to the different forums, I've also added some more as well, and they've mostly been said here, but a question and answer period at council may be a good thing. The occasional town hall meetings would be good. Newsletters would be good. Using the website more effectively if there's better ways of doing things. I know I've been watching the council minutes on the website through the summer, seeing what's going on, so I've found that information quite easy to find. Financial numbers, things like that, but there's always room for improvement. So I'm always open. If I am so privileged to be your counselor, you can give me a call and I will try to help you and move you in the right direction. And I think that's still a good old-fashioned way to do it too. So,
Thank you. I know you've been sitting on those hard chairs for an hour and a half, but hey, we're one question away from getting them all, so let's do number 12. Number 12, the sequence is going to be Glenn, David, Howard, Jason, and Suzanne. And then right after that, we will move to questions from the audience. So Glenn, please give your opinion of the RM entering into joint ventures or shared service agreements with other jurisdictions in the Winnipeg Capital Region or with private organizations.
The RM engaging in joint ventures or shared service agreements is a cost-saving measure and something the RM is already participating in. In the interest of fiscal responsibility, should continue to do. Any cost savings that result in improvements for Springfield should be considered. Recreation services would be an example for consideration. Shared use for outdoor and indoor services would help to offset costs and supply a needed resource. Thank you.
Thank you. David, joint ventures and shared service agreements.
So some of you might be familiar with what's called the Partnership for the Manitoba Capital Region, which has now been rebranded as the Winnipeg Metropolitan Region. This is an initiative that is very much given the thumbs up by the province because 2/3 of our population in the province and 2/3 of the GDP of our province come from the Winnipeg Metropolitan, the capital region, which includes all the neighboring municipalities. So the WMR, which is run by a woman I know quite well, Colleen, who has been involved with ensuring that we can partner where we can with a lot of different initiatives when it comes to some of the interests that a lot of the municipalities that surround the city of Winnipeg happen to have. And a lot of these, what started with in terms of procurement of specific services, in this case it had to do with fire equipment, but it's also, we're thinking about it in the context of transportation issues. The WMR has actually, under the PMCR, has actually published a transportation strategy that can link very carefully and nicely into our transportation master plan. So absolutely, in terms of the context of JVs, I see JVs from a business context in a slightly different meaning. But in the context of us having, as a municipality, aligned and shared interests with other municipalities, and it makes fiscal sense. That is exactly the road and the pathway that we should be taking. Thank you.
Thank you. Howard, joint ventures and shared service agreements.
Well, I think they're smart things to do, especially if it is cost effective, if it's fair, and it's an advantage to our municipalities. So to me, it's a no-brainer if we can work together with other municipalities, other identities, and bring the costs down to our people, let's do it. But then we as councillors need to make sure we do our due diligence, that it actually is that, and that it is saving us money. So the council has to do their job, and the administration to figure that out. But if it's good for us, let's go ahead and do it.
Thank you. Jason, joint ventures and shared service agreements.
Okay, just hit repeat here. Of course, I'm for joint ventures and shared service agreements as long as they result in savings to the taxpayers, no loss of services, and a fair return on our percentage of investment. We should always be looking for new ways of doing things that can either enhance the services we provide or reduce their costs. Thank you.
Okay, shared services are a good thing if handled professionally and carefully, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's. If road sharing with another jurisdiction, there should be stipulations that neither community can use that corridor for new or large development access using a cap process. All road and drainage maintenance agreements should be disseminated to Public Works annually and signed off to ensure agreement services are being handled by both entities, with Public Works contacts info traded. So they have the information and who to get a hold of.
Thank you. Now we're moving to the lightning round coming from the floor. Question number 1 is, please address the perception that Oakbank receives more services and takes a larger portion of our tax dollars. And the first one to handle that question is Glenn, followed by David, Suzanne, Howard, and Jason.
On this one here is that Oakbank has always have the perception that there's more cost in Oakbank and there's more services. In actual reality, it is actually cheaper to get the garbage picked up in Oakbank than it is in the landfill. The other side to it is that the roads, we don't realize that there is 500 square miles of roads in the rural municipality that we have to maintain. This takes a huge part of our budget in maintaining these roads with gravel, snow clearing, and all the accessories to be a safe road. Thank you.
David, the perception that Oakbank gets more than their share of tax dollars and benefits.
I think what this addresses, and I agree with what Glenn said, because the cost of servicing some rural properties obviously is going to be higher. There's just no getting around that. It speaks to the perception that we're not one municipality. That concerns me. That absolutely concerns me. Springfield is not Springfield without Oakbank. Oakbank is not Oakbank without Springfield. There is a mutually symbiotic relationship that has to exist. I think what is needed here is, it goes to the transparency issue. Let's be really clear about what rural residents get for their taxes and compare that on a spend per property basis and compare that with Oakbank. Let's start with that. And so that we can, and I've heard this since we arrived here, and I grew up in Transcona, so I'm familiar with Springfield, and I think my grandfather opened up SCI. But if this notion of rural versus urban continues, we run the risk of decaying from the inside out. And I have to say that concerns me today. It's always concerned me. And I'd like to think that we can at least work together towards propelling the municipality as a whole, which includes Oakbank and includes the rural areas as well, in a pathway forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Suzanne, the issue is Oakbank getting more services and taking more tax dollars.
Yeah, there's a lot more roads in the country to grade, and there's a lot of more ditches to mow, and it would be ridiculous to think that everybody in the city is going to head to the garbage pit to take their garbage in. So yeah, there's certain services that aren't covered in certain locations, but they all have to happen.
Thank you. Howard, what about Oakbank?
So you need to know my brother Daryl, who's here, who was the parts man at H&D for all these years, and he heard that all the time. The perception we had customers from Manola, Dougal, the country, and so I have come to understand that it's just a perception for the reasons that have been stated here. And I would like to think that I could be a kind of a go-between person, coming from being a farmer, and like I was almost like a town boy because we always lived just on the edge of Oakbank. I was in Oakbank almost every day of my young life, going for the mail or the store. So I was almost like a town kid, but yet I was a half mile out in the country until the town moved, and now I'm in town. But anyway, I think we need to work on this perception of rural versus towns. We are the RM of Springfield. Even though I would be the Ward 2 councillor, which is basically Oakbank, I am still a councillor of the RM of Springfield. And so what's good for Oakbank is good for the RM, but what's good for Dugald is good for the RM, is good for Oakbank, what's good for Enola. So I would like to look at it as the big picture, and that we're always trying to do the best for the whole community, and that would be an advantage to everybody. So that's my take on that.
Jason, Oakbank.
So I think everybody spoke to the fact that that's not true. We know it's not true. The tax base we get out of Oakbank is greater than what's spent within Oakbank. What I think it does speak to is the dysfunction of council over the years, because they know it's not true too, but we have councillors and we have a Reeve that sometimes like to play one off of the other and promise, we're going to reduce your taxes and we're going to raise them for the Oakbank guys that get everything. And again, that's not something they can do. So I think if council actually worked together as a group and got over these silly little fights and just worked to make everybody better, we wouldn't have as many silly things like that being said in the public.
Thank you. Well, the next question is closely related, so we might as well step into it. What is your view of Oakbank becoming an incorporated town or a local urban district? Howard, you're up first, then David, Jason, Suzanne, and Glenn.
Well, I think, it would be fair to ask the question and study it. I kind of don't think, from what I've heard about where the province is going, they're not looking for more municipalities, but I do understand these local urban districts. You have Garson and Tyndall not too far away from us. Lorette and Landmark are the same. So maybe it is a possibility, but I don't know enough about them without studying them. But could it be, if we studied them, if we found that that was the way to go? I believe they usually have their own little council, and then decisions are made, but they are still part of the rural municipality, and they're given money to spend within their own area. And like I say, I need to learn a little bit more about that, but I'd be open to the discussion anyway to see if that's reasonable and a possibility. So,
David, Oakbank as an LUD or incorporated?
I wouldn't support incorporation just yet. I think we're decades away from something like that. The LUD issue is an interesting one. LUDs are provided for under the Municipal Act. So one of the things that can happen is if the majority of the residents get together and demand an LUD, the council has to negotiate in good faith with deciding whether or not an LUD is possible. Let's be absolutely clear. An LUD does not give the resulting committee of that LUD, and Howard's correct, it would be a committee, and the councillor for Ward 2 would sit on that committee, and then the others have to be, at least 3, have to be elected by the residents of that particular ward. It does not give that committee the right to start building rec centers, the right to, for instance, start investing massive amounts of capital. LUDs are about infrastructure. And included within that is public parks, which is a bit interesting when you look at the Municipal Act. So an LUD certainly can be explored, and it certainly has to be discussed in the context of what residents feel they're getting. The wider issue would be, why would we need an LUD if residents felt that their issues and concerns they have with living in a Ward 2 like Oakbank, if they're being met, why would an LUD be necessary? Not opposed to it, but let's address the bigger question. What do residents feel they would gain from an LUD and that extra layer of administration and governance that they're not already receiving from the current council? Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, Oakbank incorporated or as an LUD?
Right now, I don't see the majority of residents within Oakbank supporting a move like that. I don't think they're looking for an added level of government, especially if we address the representation issue. So I don't think that's even an issue that we should be discussing, because I don't think the appetite is out there for it to happen. Thank you.
Suzanne, Oakbank as an LUD or incorporated?
I believe that we're too small to incorporate as of yet. The LUD is something that I've heard a number of my constituents talking about, and just to explore it, to put it to bed would be one thing at the very least.
Thank you. Glenn, Oakbank as an LUD or incorporated?
I would agree with Howard that the province right now is amalgamating RMs. So the incorporation side I don't see as being a positive move. The LUD, again, comes back to the people. You know, I think, again, the people of Oakbank would vote on that, and it'd be important to let them decide whether they would like an LUD. There is a cost to it, though, like David said. The cost is the administration side. So you have to look at everything when you decide that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question from the audience relates to a proposed corridor between Springfield, Oakbank, and Winnipeg, as opposed to the twinning of Highway 15 and the integration with Cloverleaf and Perimeter highways. Have you any views on that in terms of what the RM should be advocating? And we hit the button. Jason, followed by Glenn, Howard, Suzanne, and David. Jason.
I believe the long-term plan by the province is to extend Chief Peguis Trail, put a bridge over the perimeter, put a bridge over the floodway, and extend it straight out, kind of where the power lines are. But we are decades away from that happening. So I think any advocacy on our part to get that done right now is just wasted time. The twinning of 15, I think we all found out what the province was going to do when they redid the bridge to just 3 lanes and not 4 lanes. So again, I don't think there's any appetite from the province to fund a project like that. I would love to see it. It's a ridiculously dangerous road. My aunt used to work for the RCMP, and they used to refer to that as just the death highway because there are so many accidents around there. But if the province isn't willing to do it, and we know their spending is going down, it's tough to advocate for something that's not going to happen. Thank you.
Glenn, Oakbank corridor, 20 of 15.
In our master transportation plan, it actually talks about the third corridor to the Winnipeg and joining up through Chief Peguis Trail, Gun Road, and a bridge over to Cedar Lake Road. Having said that, I think we need to lobby the government, because if we don't ask, we don't get. Yes, they're cutting back, there's no question about it, but it has to be on the radar. If you look at the traffic flows of Garvin and you look at the traffic flows of Dugald, they're being maxed out. There is dangerous situations happening there on a daily basis. If we don't work hard in trying to get this, yes, it may not happen for 50 years, but at least we're being heard that it is a necessity to safety and for our residents of Springfield. Thank you.
Howard, please speak to transportation between us and Winnipeg.
Yeah, Cedar Lake Road, my understanding, which is the mile south where our old business used to be, is projected as the corridor to Winnipeg. I know that when we built our building, we had to set our building back extra amount of feet because they wanted to prepare for a highway in the future. I know if they put it there, if you go straight west into Winnipeg, they wouldn't have to buy out any houses or anything that would cost them extra money. The argument was always go down Springfield, but there's lots of yards to buy out there. So anyway, I agree with Glenn that, I would love to see that. We know what our provincial economy is like, and of course they're the ones that build these highways, but to keep lobbying and keep asking, it doesn't hurt. Highway 15, something is happening now, and so I think we should have something to alleviate the danger of both Garvin Road and Highway 15 and the accidents that are happening there. So,
Suzanne, the road to Winnipeg.
Yes, I agree that 15 highway is a very over-traveled. At about 4 o'clock, you can't get on or off of it. It's a train. So, yeah, there's something needs to be done about that. Cedar Lake Road, it's going to be years before that happens. Looking at the government, they can't even do a perimeter. So we can start lobbying, but it's going to take 10 to 15 years, I'm sure.
Thank you. David, can we get there from here?
Yeah, actually, I agree with Glenn. This is an issue, this is option 3 under the Transportation Master Plan written by a friend of mine, Bob Krilko. So the idea is that this is trade-related infrastructure. This kind of corridor, yes, we're probably a couple of decades away. This kind of corridor is absolutely vital for a municipality and a community like ours. If we're going to get residents into the city, and more importantly, residents coming from the city. Think of agritourism, think of the kinds of commercial interests that might drive them here on a weekend, for instance. Think about new recreation facilities, and I'll be biased because I'm a softball coach, where we have provincial championships out here. They're going to need a way to get into this. So that particular corridor is very much on the minds of the province, because they absolutely understand that linking the capital region through basic infrastructure like roading is absolutely vital to improving the economy of this province. So our role as a council will be to do exactly what Glenn suggested, and that's to advocate and say, we would like this to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Great. When can it happen? Because it's vital for our interests, and it's going to help propel the provincial economy at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next question, your views and policies regarding seniors housing in Springfield. And up first is Suzanne, followed by David, Howard, Jason, Glenn.
Okay, we need to keep our seniors, if not in their own homes, in the municipality, so that we can visit them and keep in touch with them, because being a senior is a very lonely thing. And we have to have housing to accommodate them, and we need the assisted living as well, because we're going to get overloaded in the ones that we do have.
Thank you. David, seniors housing.
So seniors housing and housing in general falls to some extent under provincial jurisdiction, because it's also a health issue. But I actually believe that municipalities can, and some of them do, play a very strong role in ensuring that seniors can age in place. I'm faced with the reality that I have a mother living in Ottawa who's considering potentially moving back into Winnipeg. So even things like secondary suites would be of interest, not for us, we don't have the room, unfortunately, for a secondary suite, but for rural folks who want to ensure that previous generations who have worked the land, for instance, they have a place for their elderly parents to age in place. As I say, there are various policies that a municipality can enact to encourage the development of secondary suites or encourage the development of seniors housing. And I'd like to see us at least consider some of those, learn from best practices and even mistakes in other jurisdictions. And then that way we're at least setting our first foot forward, or our right foot forward, on the right path to addressing this very important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Howard, seniors housing.
Yeah, I think we need to advocate for more. Obviously, a lot of it is municipal, or rather provincial, and not just into our own hands, but I think we need to see that. There's a group, Vision 2020, that's been working. They have some plans. I don't know how fast that'll happen, but they would like to see more seniors housing, and we could use more personal care. We can use more assisted living. And in my own experience, when my dad bought the farm from my grandmother, she was already, I guess, probably in her late 60s, and we were allowed to move a house trailer onto our farmyard, and therefore she babysat us as we were growing up. Then, as she got older, my brother and I would get her groceries. It was just a positive experience, and I think that should still be allowed in cases where people are willing to have their parents, their grandparents living with them on their properties out in the country. I know in town it would be harder, but there's these tiny houses now. They're the rage. So maybe we should be where the rage is with these tiny houses, and maybe that would be places for seniors to live right beside family. But I think we have to think of some creative ways too, because there is not enough housing. We have big, long waiting lists. What can we do to help our seniors age and live where they've lived all their lives. So,
Thank you. Jason, seniors housing.
I think we need to work with all the stakeholders to figure out ways to improve and add on to senior housing and affordable housing. Also granny suites, as David spoke to. I know there was some debate on last council about allowing them. They're in the master plan. If you get that forwarded, obviously we can do that. But the biggest thing is to work with every single stakeholder and try to do whatever we can to get as many new suites and new facilities built as fast as possible, because we're in an aging population now. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn, seniors housing.
Yes, definitely. This one hits home. My mom just moved into an assisted living in Kelowna Meadows. And I can tell you it's not just aging, it's also about opportunity, because they have different activities within their building that they're able to do. And this brings the older people together to be able to feel self-worth, and that is important. I also agree with the nursing homes and the life lease and the whole structure of all those processes of the different stages. Once again, we need more, and we need to keep our residents here in Springfield. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. I ask with some trepidation, but here it is. Pot, grass, weed, cannabis, marijuana. It's being legalized. It's taken out of the criminal code as a prohibited substance. How do you see the RM's role regarding regulation and legislation regarding this product? Who's first on this beauty? Jason.
I'm not allowed to do. Okay, so this is the most dangerous question I've heard at any forum, and it's left to me to answer it first. The reality is this stuff's going to be legal. I know there was some talk to put it on a plebiscite to see whether we wanted to allow it to be sold within the RM. I'm of the opinion it's going to be in the RM. It's already in the RM. We need to set rules on where it's sold. We might as well have it here because A, you're going to get tax dollars. B, last thing I want is a kid going to the city, buying dope, getting high, driving home while my kid's on the road. So at the end of the day, it's here. We need to deal with it head on. We can't ignore it. Treat it like you treat booze. And figure out where it can be sold and get those rules in place as fast as possible, because we're not prepared. The police are prepared. The province isn't prepared. It's a nightmare. So what can you say?
Thank you. Suzanne, the need for weed.
It's coming. They're going to have edibles in a year too. So I was watching a show on Denver, and they had the seniors in there, and they were shopping, and they were using it for pain relief, and everybody was accepting it like nothing else. So it's coming. Get used to it. Embrace it. We'll set up some rules, get some money from it, and move on.
Thank you. Howard, is the grass always greener?
So I have trouble with this one. If I take Ward 2 Oak Bank, if we allow weed to be sold somewhere on Main Street in the commercial areas, I think it's too close to our schools, no matter if it's legal or not. And so I would like to see a plebiscite because I want to know what the people think. But if I'm in council and I'm asked to vote, I don't care how much tax money we'll make from it, I will be voting no against selling cannabis in Springfield. If I lose, then my job would be to make sure that the rules that are put in place would be carried out, and so that's where I sit on that issue.
Thank you. David, is it always the pot that's calling the kettle?
Yes, I did inhale. So what I would start by saying is that I don't know enough about this particular issue. But as a legal substance, I would not be opposed for it being sold in the municipality. This is a great example of where you need evidence-based governance and evidence-based policy. This is a great example where we have to ensure what is the, I'm getting back to some econometrics here, but what's the dependent variable in all this? And what are the independent variables that go into deciding whether this would be good for the municipality? Everybody, and I think it's been mentioned already by Jason and Howard, everybody's wrestling with this. Nobody's quite sure. And I mean, everybody, I mean other municipalities, even provincial governments, they're wrestling with this. They're trying to figure out how to craft policy that doesn't put itself on a collision course with other municipalities and other jurisdictions. It's going to have to be a slow and cautious approach by us. But let's gather the data, let's gather the perspective from you folks and others in the municipality and see where we stand. Thank you.
And Glenn, some token comments.
I would agree. This is not an easy one. You know, I agree with the plebiscite of letting the people decide whether we should be selling it. It is going to be legal. We need to regulate it. Definitely need to put it in places where it's not totally accessible to young people, because the age of my understanding is 19. So we need to regulate it and be responsible adults. And yeah, it's not an easy one. Thank you.
Thank you all for handling that question with such aplomb. There is one more question from the audience, then we're going to take your closing comments. And that is, I think it's a good question. My observation has been that, again, with all due respect, the average age of the audience at these forums is well, it's not in the 20s, let's put it that way. So the question is, how would you involve younger people of voting age in municipal politics and affairs? Who gets that one first? Howard.
Well, I've always kind of been interested in politics from a young age, so I don't really get why people aren't interested. But I kind of liked what David was saying here, is that we could get students from the high school to sit in on council meetings, to interact. And I almost, weren't you doing something like that already? Yeah, so the council is doing that. There was youth parliament that was in this area for a long time, and there's people here that were involved in that many, many years ago. It's changed a little bit from being locally run more now by the school board, but I had some involvement. My one son had involvement, so the municipality possibly giving a little money to see that continue to go forward, so that people do learn about the parliamentary procedure and a little bit about politics. So wherever we could help, and I don't know where all those areas are, but those are a couple little areas that I think are good starting places.
Thank you. Glenn, how do we get young people more involved?
Yes, Howard, you're right. We do have a student sitting on council. I believe you got to go to the school. You're not going to get them into the Chamber of Commerce or in the chamber. What you have to do is go to them. You have to engage them. I think it's important that maybe council as a group would go to the high schools, the middle schools, and just educate the young and show that there is an interest, because they live here and we do listen to what they say. It's very important that they be heard and we listen, because that's what they want. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, getting young people involved.
I'd like to start by asking everybody to have a quick look around in the crowd here. The average age in Oakbank is 36 years old, and I don't think it's reflected here. So it's not just, sorry, Tiffany. I don't think it's just the young. It's almost everybody is just tuning out of politics today. I think whatever council looks like after the election, they got to do a better job of selling what they're doing for their community to the community. Brag about all your successes, and then involve the youth. And like our councillor over here said, go to the schools, involve them. But you need to sell the entire community, because we're not seeing them out to these forums. We're not seeing them come out and vote. Last election, we had 25% participation at Oakbank. It's terrible. So people are just staying at home and tuning out altogether. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, getting more young people involved.
I just went.
Sorry. You just turned down an opportunity to double speak. Suzanne, I guess you did guess to take your turn there. Just please speak about young people involved. Sorry.
Yeah, involving them in the council chambers it's kind of hard to do unless we have a 1 to 3 o'clock time slot that they could do a field trip on. But entering into the classrooms, I think, would have more of an effect on them, and people would participate better if they had more of us around them to give them a leadership.
Thank you. David, the involvement of young people.
It's funny because the students I get at the University of Winnipeg are very politically involved and motivated. And normally that's at the provincial and federal level. But you don't see them that motivated at the municipal level. They don't often talk about Winnipeg politics. They might complain a little bit, but they don't often get themselves that involved, I have to say. So I agree with what's been said. Let's start with the youth. But also let's look at, and Jason mentioned the average age being 36. Busy people, busy lives. And all of us have been going to door, and a lot of times we're finding that people are out. People are busy. Ringette, hockey, softball in our case, or Jets games, as there's one tonight, for instance. Not a lot of people are out there. The reason for that is that they don't necessarily, and this is why I'm seeing it with my students, they're not seeing a connection to what's called local body politics. They're not often seeing the relevance for what council does in their day-to-day lives. And I think that speaks to this engagement issue of we have to find ways to communicate and to get them involved as much as possible. So not just at the youth level, but how do you get young families more involved and integrated into politics and political life in a municipality so that they feel represented and they have a better chance of being involved or becoming involved themselves in future elections. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Well, that's it for the questions. So now it's I'm going to ask each candidate to make a closing statement and speak about whatever you want to speak about as your wrap-up comments. You can have 4 minutes if you need it. Don't have to use it. But up to 4 minutes, please, for a closing statement. And the sequence will be Howard, Suzanne, Jason, David, Glenn. Howard.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce, Nicole and her executive, for setting up all these meetings. I think it's been very helpful. Thank you to Linton Sellen for hosting, and I think this should be your lifetime career here in Springfield. You do a really good job, and nobody was doing this, so that's the main thing. They understood. To all of you for coming. You do care about the community and you wanted to hear what we had to say, and I appreciate that. And then to all these fine candidates, just good to get to know them and to meet them. And thanks for being so fair in all your comments and doing what we need to be doing as civilized people here. So basically, I've had the privilege of growing up here in Springfield. I've made my living here. All my working days with the farm and with H&D here was done in Springfield. Raised my children here, and I plan to continue living here for quite a while longer. I grew my last crop this year, and so I'm going to be winding down the farm over the next few months, hauling all my grain out, and probably in 6 to 8 months I will be wanting to be busier than I am. And so that's why I feel I have a good opportunity now to serve my community. I can do this as a full-time job, basically. I don't need to be looking for something else to do, so I want to give it a good effort. And so basically, on my literature, some of you have seen it, some of you may see it yet, I say I'm ready to serve, and I just come with that to tell you tonight I'm ready to serve the people of Springfield.
Thank you. Suzanne, your closing comments, please.
Thank you. Well, thanks everybody for coming out tonight to see me trip over my tongue. I've not done a lot of public speaking, so this was quite a test, but I'll get better if I am elected. I've spent a lot of time, a long 56 years here, and there's nowhere else I'd rather live. And the community is got a good spirit, and we just need to kick it into gear and get that recreation center done for Oak Bank, and we'll all be better.
Thank you. Jason, your closing comments, please.
I got caught finally. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, especially on the Jets home opener. Nobody knows the score, right? For Ward 2, you have 3 great people running here. All of us are willing to serve our community and try to make our place a better place to live. About 1,500 people under the age of 19 currently live in Oak Bank. We need a council that will be willing to make decisions now that will keep as many of those youth in our RM as they grow up. We also need to make sure our seniors have the ability to stay within our community as long as they want to. I don't want to be a politician for the rest of my life. I just want to serve a term or two and help my community and make some significant changes. I want a rec center for Oak Bank. I want safer streets. I want our roads to be in better conditions, and I want to help my RM grow. Thank you.
Thank you. David, your closing comments, please.
One of the most powerful experiences I've had in recent memory has been just this past spring. And we started tonight when Linton asked about motivation. And this was what sealed the deal for me in terms of wanting to put my name forward. And that's being a softball coach for my daughter's U12 team. There's nothing more powerful than seeing players either stealing home on a pass ball, for instance, or a batter who's been maybe a bit scared of the ball for most of the season, but by the end of the season, she's sending it out into right field. And a young pitcher, who had pre-season been working very hard to work her skills and hone her skills so that hopefully Coach Dave would put her in at least one inning, and then watching the smile on her face and her teammates patting her on the back. I hope that as a coach, I've made a small impact with respect to building those kids' confidences as they inherit a very turbulent economy and world that we're leaving for them. I'd like to do the same at this level. Thank you to Linton. Fantastic, greatest weed puns I've heard in years. Thank you to Nicole and Brent, the others in the executive, Karen. Fantastic opportunity. Thanks for you folks. It's been said before, but I'll echo it. Thanks for coming out and at least being interested. As a candidate for Ward 2, I'm asking for half an hour, maybe 45 minutes of your time on the 24th, and in exchange for that, I'll give you 4 years of mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Glenn, your closing comments, please.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out this evening. I'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce and everybody involved in making this process happen, and thank you, Lytton, for doing this service. On behalf of this is that I take pride as being a Springfield resident. I always call it the best of both worlds, close to the city and also out in the country. 4 years ago, I decided to serve this municipality and run for councillor. It did not come easy, as friends and family all came to me and said I would be good at it. I believe with this knowledge that I've learned and keep pushing forward and making this municipality move forward will allow us to have a quality of life and love living in the rural municipality of Springfield. Thank you.
Now's the time, ladies and gentlemen, when we thank all 5 of these candidates for their excellent presentations and for putting their name forward. And I want to thank all of you for your cooperation tonight. It's been another excellent forum in terms of everybody's conduct and the presentations from the candidates, and it allowed us all to hear what they had to say. And again, the democratic process doesn't happen without people being willing to put their name forward. And I personally very much appreciate you folks and every one of you guys who put your name forward at every forum, because that's the only way the process works, is when good people, and we've had so many up here over these number of forums, when they put their name forward, that's when we get it, good things happening. And then you folks taking your time to come out and care enough to actually hear what they have to say. So I want to thank you all very much for coming out tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Linton. And again, I think we need to take an opportunity to congratulate all these fine candidates on their choice to enter into the political foray. And of course, we wish you all the best of luck in your continued campaigns. And we please get a round of applause for our candidates here tonight. I have to thank Linton Sullen, who has been doing such a fine, fantastic job for us here at the Chamber. We couldn't have picked a better, more professional, more polished moderator. He's done such a fabulous job of bringing all of this to you guys, making all the questions meaningful, and of course, keeping everything just having so much integrity. It's been a wonderful process, and I'd love to, please, can we get a round of applause for Linton Sullen? And of course, I have to acknowledge Springfield Chamber of Commerce. We have a number of board members who are here this evening working. We are a volunteer-driven community organization. Daryl, who has done a tremendous effort recording all of the forums to such a high level of professionalism. It's amazing. He has them up within 24 hours. You guys can check this out on Facebook. We're going to be also having them up on YouTube. So if there's anything that you feel that you missed or you misheard, feel free to check in on the Chamber's webpage. We will have links to drive you to those videos. Brent Bellick, who was in the audience, is also on our executive, was circulating with the questions. Rose Barton, and of course our member admin, Karen Lalonde. A big round of applause for our folks from the Chamber. And of course, we have great membership, we have great support, and we love bringing the community together at events such as this. And thank you all for attending. And one last thing, if we can ask you in the spirit of community, the Coyotes were out here setting up for us, but they're not here to take it down. So if you guys wouldn't mind to grab a few chairs on your way out, that would be fantastic. And one last reminder that the advance polls are open. I didn't hear any mention of it here tonight, but they are. So please tell your neighbors, tell your friends, get everybody involved, and let's get out and vote. Thank you very much.